Good morning, everyone. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Ministry of National Defense for inviting me and for organizing this important conference. It's especially, it's a real pleasure to be here in Seoul. 2 days ago, the United States celebrated Veterans Day, when we recognized the sacrifices and benefits of our armed forces. And it's very meaningful for me to be here during that time, to be in South Korea, a land that is free because of the bravery and sacrifices of the militaries of so many countries, many of whom are represented here today. It's also a tremendous honor for me personally to be invited to speak with such a prestigious panel. I should start out by pointing out that the views I'm about to express are my own and not those of the U.S. government. There's a conventional wisdom emerging in Asia that constraints on the U.S. defense budget will herald the decline of the United States more generally and the end to Pax Americana. The message I want to leave with you today is that concerns of American decline as a result of constrained defense budgets are overblown. While we do face profound challenges in transitioning to a more constrained budgetary environment, these challenges are certainly manageable. To explain this, I will explain U.S. budget constraints, how I see the Pentagon is adapting to them, and identify some challenges and opportunities that will result. I'd like to begin by describing the global strategic context in which U.S. defense budget cuts are taking place. This is a period of significant change in U.S. defense policy and military strategy. As the United States transitions out of a period of 2 long and painful wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, it is realizing that the global center of geopolitical power has shifted toward the Asia-Pacific and that rapid changes in technology have emerged which will have profound implications for the future of warfare. These changes are also occurring within a complex political climate at home as the United States emerges from the Great Recession and attempts to put its fiscal house in order. As a consequence of major cuts to most federal discretionary spending, the planned defense budget for the U.S. Department of Defense has been reduced to the tune of $987 billion over 10 years. Given the confluence of these strategic and political changes, cuts to the Defense Department's budget represent an opportunity for the United States to take stock of its interests, determine its post-war needs, set priorities, and ensure that American military power remains ready to meet the challenges of the 21st century. Now that I've outlined the strategic and political context for these cuts, allow me to address the historical context. Now, when you're giving a presentation on budgets, it's almost impossible to avoid having slides with a chart. So here's the main chart. As you can see, recent cuts to the U.S. defense budget are a return to the historic norm. The cuts that the Pentagon is facing are manageable and historically have not heralded a broader American decline. Cuts that are wisely implemented will return the United States to a budgetary status quo antebellum. I would also note that even after recent cuts, U.S. defense spending is still more than $100 billion higher than it was in the 1990s during America's supposed unipolar moment. I would also point out, as you can see here, U.S. defense spending after these cuts will remain higher than the historic average of $480 billion a year. For a peacetime budget, spending under the sequester remains quite high. U.S. military budget dominance, at least as expressed in budgets, will also be sustained in this new budgetary environment. To me, as you can see here in comparisons of the United States defense spending as percentage of global military spending. To me, this strongly suggests that concerns about a global power shift, especially a shift attributed to U.S. defense budget cuts, are unwarranted. Nonetheless, these cuts will have a significant effect on American military power. Over the short term, the Pentagon has sought immediate savings with cuts to all aspects of its budget, aside from personnel costs, which so far have been protected. The Pentagon is also preparing to draw down from a wartime to a peacetime operational tempo, which will further cut costs. Yet over the long term, the Pentagon is faced with a major strategic choice between capacity, i.e. force structure such as brigades, ships, and battalions, capability, i.e. force modernization, and readiness. My expectation is that all three aspects of military power will be adjusted somewhat, though my sense is that the Pentagon will look to cut force structure more than force modernization. Depending on the specific choices to be made, cuts that prioritize force modernization will ensure that the U.S. military remains well suited to the challenges it will likely face in the Asia-Pacific in the 21st century: naval and maritime power, air power, and capabilities in space and cyberspace. To inform these strategic choices, the United States has already begun to make decisions about its priorities. This is where the rebalance to Asia comes in my view. It demonstrates the continued commitment of the United States to the world's most vital region. We have already seen the effects of the rebalance in the force posture changes that have been announced and the investments that have been made in the kinds of capabilities that will be needed in the region. This includes the announcement that 60% of U.S. naval forces will be devoted to the Pacific by 2020, the forward deployment of the Littoral Combat Ship to Singapore, and other announcements to update America's force posture around the region. Air-sea battle is, to me, another indication of the seriousness of America's commitment to sustaining its military power in Asia. While the air-sea battle concept does not target any specific country, it is clear to me that air-sea battle will help the United States deter the challenges it will likely face, including in the Asia-Pacific. Yet prioritization also comes with its challenges, and I'd like to highlight 4 of them, all of which I believe are eminently manageable. First, the need to manage risk and to accept the reality that some fights are not worth fighting, especially if our major national interests are not affected. 2, the sequester was designed to be so painful so as to deter its implementation. That failed, and one aspect of the sequester that has proven especially problematic is its provision that cuts generally cannot be tailored. Thus, the Pentagon's hands have been significantly tied. This policy will need to be adjusted to give the Pentagon the flexibility it needs to prioritize. 3, the Pentagon is facing the rising relative costs of personnel, maintenance, and operations, which increase about 1.5% more quickly than inflation. Over time, without significant reforms, these expenses will represent a larger part of defense spending if the budget only increases at the rate of inflation as currently designed. 4th and finally, many of the major systems composing the U.S. force structure are Cold War-era systems that are coming to the end of their life cycles. In the coming years, this will necessitate new investments in very expensive platforms, such as aircraft carriers, bombers, and SSBNs. But I think it's important to note, as we saw with the recent christening of the new class of aircraft carrier, that these are investments that the United States is making. To me, the most significant danger involved with cuts to the U.S. defense budget is not the cuts themselves, but that America's potential adversaries may miscalculate and see defense budgets to be a signal of a lack of American will and capability. Going back to this chart of U.S. defense spending, it is clear to me that the U.S. has a history of increasing budgets to meet wartime challenges. There is no reason to believe we would not do so again if need be. Still, the United States has an obligation to reassure its allies and partners of its continuing commitments and capabilities. This is a very achievable goal, as most Asian countries are seeking enhanced relationships with the United States that often includes an interest in closer military ties. The United States is navigating these budgetary challenges during a time when several Asian powers are increasing their defense budgets. In 2012, Asian countries spent over $287 billion on defense, for the first time in modern history exceeding total military spending in Europe. With much of this growth has come from China, many other Asian nations are increasing their defense budgets, including the Philippines and Indonesia. Some say that these investments are a sign of an emerging regional arms race, but I disagree. Rather, for the most part, I see these investments as a sign that military investments are gradually catching up with the robust economic growth that the region has enjoyed for many years. With these countries, the United States has a historic opportunity to harness their growing power and can help them contribute more to play a larger role in sustaining the health and success of the international system. Much as America's defense budget constraints represent an opportunity to identify interests and prioritize missions for the 21st century, so too do the rising military budgets of Asia represent an opportunity for Asia's rising powers to define the kind of power they are going to be. And the United States has an opportunity to shape, enable, and lead this regional military emergence. Still, increases to military budgets in Asia have not been uniform. Several critical American allies and partners underinvest in their militaries, even though they face significant security challenges. In these cases, the United States is looking to its allies to do more. It is incumbent on the United States to work with its friends to encourage and enable them to contribute more to their own defense and to help sustain the international order. Yet ultimately, there's only so much the United States can do in this regard. Investing in national defense is ultimately a domestic decision. In both cases, the United States and its allies and partners should conduct frank discussions about the roles that each country seeks to play in the world. There's an opportunity for the United States to support these objectives by building partner capacity, enhancing interoperability, and encouraging interregional cooperation. We also need to consider the role of extra-regional organizations like NATO and the role that they can play in the region, helping address some of the challenges that we face, including encouraging the openness and stability of global commons, helping develop and firm up rules and norms, and promoting cooperation through the use of dialogue in their good offices. We also need to consider the role of the regional architecture that is gradually emerging in the region, and their ability to organize and legitimate collective action and facilitate dialogue, dispute resolution, and crisis management. To conclude, in the 21st century, global peace and prosperity will surely be tested. However, it is unclear from where those challenges may originate. Despite the budgetary constraints we face, the United States remains well positioned to lead the way in preserving the international system upon which all nations depend. We will do this with our own strength and capabilities, but also with our ability to lead the world in collective action. Thank you again to the organizers of this dialogue. I look forward to hearing the comments and reactions of my fellow panelists. Thank you.